All right, good morning and welcome to a formal session of the Amil County Board of Commissioners. It's April 3rd at 10 a.m. I'm going to kick us off in the flag salute.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, seize our calendar session. Is there any changes, modifications that need to be done?
I don't think so.
Okay. Moving on to D's public comment. Does anybody have any public comment in the audience? You do. Is it on a non-agenda item? Oh, is there an agenda back there? And also fill out one of the tan cards. Most likely not if you're asking. Okay, come on up and then we'll get you to go ahead and give your public comment and then we'll fill that out later on your way out. Come on down and name and address, please.
Linda McGrew, 734 Southeast Palmer Lane in Dayton. I have okay. Go ahead and show. My public comment is, it was back, not my papers, but you saw a land swap in Dayton and last year, and the land swap went through, and I came and testified for the land swap, and after it was voted that you would swap the land with Dayton, I listed my property for sale. I sold it, and it was a contingent on to evaluate the property to make sure it was buildable, and which it was, but they ran into a major problem with the city of Dayton. And I went to several meetings with the city of Dayton, and I even went with the people that purchased our land, and it was quite a meeting. But the problem is there was things said in the meeting that I was told that was supposed to happen, but it didn't happen. And so I'm here to tell the county commissioners that I'm really disappointed. I missed out on a $5.5 million sale of my property and my neighbor's property to build homes there. But the buyer withdrew because the city would not, they would come up with different plans. And I went to all the planning meetings and everything else, and they decided, because they were going through a feasibility, which we gave them 4 months. We extended another 6 months, and then we extended it again. And they still couldn't get anything from the city of Dayton. And I've talked to 2 different planning people at the city of Dayton that they're not full-time planners, but the city hires them to come in. And I also talked to, I brought up some stuff at the city council meeting. Of course, we've went through 2 mayors since then. And now I've talked to this new city manager, and they're saying 3 to 6 years before they'll even be able to do anything. And then I was getting some more information from the city, and I was told by the city recorder that it could be up to 20 years. Well, I'm 66 years old. My neighbor is 88. And I'm very upset because I was told one thing to get the land swap, and another thing, because I put my house up for sale. I put the property up for sale. Between my neighbor and I, it's 20.6 acres, right next to the 50 acres that the city owns that's not within the urban growth boundary. And so I'm sort of disappointed because all the meetings I went to, they've spent a lot of money having everything surveyed, and even the new city manager, when we had a meeting with him, he said he had to live in Lafayette because there was not enough housing. And then I was at the last city council meeting, and something was brought up about another piece of property. And of course, the city council person was shut down really quick because they knew the buyer had already submitted a pre-application meeting. And so I am really concerned because now my property, I can't sell it because the city of Dayton doesn't have enough water or sewer upgrades. And I mentioned to the city manager that the governor of Oregon has put out $100 million that could be used for infrastructure in small towns that, we're wanting to grow. So that's my public comment. I was told one thing when they were getting land swap, and now I've been told something totally different, and I'm very disappointed. And I really believe that the county commissioners need to know what the city of Dayton is doing by not allowing people to sell their land. We were going to put 140 homes, and it would be right next to the 50 acres, right down from the airport, which I've been told different things about those two properties. And so it just really is disappointing. And they sold a piece of property to build, I think, 12 homes on, the city of Dayton did, and it was a closed sale. So they found someone to buy it and the contractor to build it.
Yep.
And when I went down in there where it was at, it was already plumbed for sewer and water. So
All right, we'll definitely look into that. I was a little bit concerned as the comment was going on that maybe it was something the county did, but this definitely seems
No,
very,
no.
very focused on the city of
Yeah.
Dayton, just for clarification.
yeah, because when I left this meeting, I set up a meeting with the one planner, and the planner told me, he said, well, you're looking at 2 to 4 years. And so the more time went by and more meetings and different things, I was told by the new city manager that it could be 3 to 6 years. And then when I went to go get paperwork that I have, I was told by the city recorder, you're looking at 20.
Let's
So,
stay in
I'm-
touch, Linda. I have communications with Dayton and the city councils. I go to their meetings and stuff. So let's stay in touch. If you could send me an email. Okay.
Yeah, I don't do, I don't have a way. And my neighbor, Harold Lyons, he has 8 8.9 acres and I have 12 acres. And we had designated land for, to donate to the city for parks and all that. So it just, and then I find out they may approve. Dayton put in a new pump station off where I live. And it was supposed to be 1.5 million, but now it's went up to over 3 million. And I saw them tie into the property that the one council member was talking about, but they sort of shut her down because, you know, I'm looking at getting my property in.
Yeah. Let's stay in touch. I'm going to give you my cell phone number.
Okay.
And that way, if there's any follow-up I need to do with you.
Well, I didn't know if I needed to talk to, I got Ken Friday's number and to maybe set up a meeting because I'm not getting any younger.
Well, I
And
think,
neither is my neighbor.
I think this is a good first step. I mean, you've been through a lot of steps, but I know that Chair Johnston and conversation with Ken Friday will be able to at least help navigate what's going on.
Well, either that or I'm gonna try to get my property. I'll have to hire an attorney, get my property rezoned.
I'm sorry that you've gone through this because it's, you know, sometimes government red tape can be really
Yeah.
an issue, but thank you for coming.
Thank you, Linda.
And, and Commissioner Johnston will be talking to you,
Okay.
okay?
Thank you.
All right, thank you for coming.
Is there any other public comments? Anybody online, raise your virtual hand. Seeing none, okay. Moving on to item E, department updates. We have Travis Pease, Mark Lago, welcome. Nessa also. No, go ahead.
I was just gonna wait my turn.
I swear it wasn't one of those things where I was waiting for somebody to go and be like, oh, hey, let me help you with that.
Yeah. Well, good morning.
Good morning, welcome.
So obviously you did a little introduction, but Travis Pease, the Parks Manager. We have Nessa Hayes, who is actually our chair of our advisory board. So we're all going to say a little bit here this morning, and we'll start with Travis.
Perfect.
Hey, good morning. Thanks for having us today. So outside our continuing work on the park system plan, which Mark will talk about here in just a minute, we have really tried to focus on our ongoing maintenance and our standard of care of our existing parks, just really trying to focus on what we have in hand instead of chasing things that are outside of our means and trying to do things that aren't relevant to the necessary work that we need to do at the moment. We are trying to provide proactive maintenance the best we can and continue to address some of the lower cost deferred maintenance items. Last year, we painted the restrooms at Rogers Landing and Ed Grenfell, as well as painting the picnic shelter at Ed Grenfell. Ed Grenfell is one of our high-use parks. That's where we have a lot of our reservations, so it makes sense to put a little bit of sweat equity and a little bit of money into that site. We're also trying to tackle areas within our parks that have long overgrown with brush and has a lot of debris piles. So we're really trying to focus on that maintenance, improve the quality, get more people out to our parks, have a positive experience in that regard. And then lastly, one of our larger ticket items we're working on is working with the county IT department to finish the upgrades to a new camera system at Rogers Landing Park. That's improving replacing the software, replacing all the hardware, and adding one additional camera to the system. And I'll pass it over to Mark.
So an update on our parks system plan. So last April, we received all of the RFP proposals and scored them. And the same month I came before you all to get the contract approved with Design Workshop. So Travis and I have been meeting with Design Workshop every other week to go through the plan and talk about situations and try to get the plan to the best possibility in the development. Right now, we're at 75% complete. And going forward, the next steps would be Travis and I will look at, there's a final draft right now. We're going to go through the whole thing, make any necessary changes or corrections, then bring it to the advisory board. The advisory board then will look at that as well, have some comments, possible to changes. We'll put those together. Then we'll come before the board with a draft, give you plenty of time to look at the draft, any comments or corrections or additions you might want to see in the plan. Then we'll come back again for a final approval of that plan. So it's going very well. We're very happy with the firm that we have selected. They're doing a really good job for the county.
Are we on schedule?
Yes, we're definitely on schedule. Yeah.
Thank you.
So I would have to say, now you said schedule, maybe June, I'll be coming before you for the final. So we're really trying to get this done before the fiscal year, but it might be run into a little bit of June, excuse me, July.
Okay.
So, okay, I'll hand it over to the chair of the advisory board.
Yes.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for welcoming me, and thanks to Mark and Travis for inviting the Parks Advisory Board to participate this morning. I really appreciate the opportunity to share what the Parks Advisory Board has been working on over the past year to support Yamhill County's parks. Since early 2024, our volunteer board has focused on 3 key areas: outreach, planning, and administration. We started the fiscal year with a scaled back version of Summer Parks Quest, which offered useful insights into community engagement. That experience shaped our next project, coming up this July 12th, Positively Electric, a dog-friendly event happening at Ed Grenfell Park. Our goal is to raise $10,000 to restore power to the park and shelters. So far, by passing the hat at a recent meeting, we have raised $750 to plan to repaint the park's picnic tables as part of a broader volunteer effort. Christy Cook is leading the project, supported by Celine McCarthy, Vice Chair Carla Chambers, Secretary Amanda Melhoff, and myself. Outdoor Education Adventures, a nonprofit I co-founded, is helping process donations. With leadership from Carla Chambers, we expanded West Valley outreach, contacting over 70 organizations. We received responses from the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde, Hampton Lumber, and West Valley Fire. At the county fair, our booth promoted the park system plan and sparked conversations with residents. Next time, we plan to add an interactive element to deepen engagement. Parks Advisory Board members also serve as park liaisons to help monitor and support individual parks. For example, Amanda Melhoff has coordinated visits at Blackwell Park. Celine Hall continues her work keeping Rogers Landing stocked with life jackets, and I've been focused on identifying funding for improvements at Charles Metzger Park. We have also been actively involved in the park system plan process, from evaluating RFPs to promoting the public survey, which received over 600 responses. The selected firm, Design Workshop, has led a collaborative effort, and we're excited for the next phase. In partnership with the Oregon Department of Forestry, we've also begun preparing for the spread of the emerald ash borer beetle. Board members, with leadership from Casey Heesacker, received training and are using tree plotter software to inventory ash trees, particularly in riparian areas. Traps have been placed, and we're preparing grant applications to support future treatment and replanting. Last summer, we conducted traffic counts at 6 parks. One-day highs included 106 vehicles at Ed Grenfell and 617 at Rogers Landing. These numbers confirm how heavily our parks are used and appreciated. This year brought both internal progress and a significant loss. In December, we lost longtime chair Jim Colbert, who served with dedication for 12 years. We are planning a memorial bench at Ed Grenfell in his honor. We've also logged over 646 volunteer hours this fiscal year. This is a value of donated time at nearly $22,000. We've also revised our bylaws, helped update park ordinances, and contributed to the redesign of the county website's parks pages. We educated ourselves on recreational immunity, an issue that became urgent after a lawsuit in Newport. Carla Chambers worked with the Oregon Trails Coalition to advocate for a legislative fix, which was successfully passed. Since the board turnover in early 2023, we've regained momentum and welcomed engaged members like Leslie Anderson, though we currently have 2 open seats. We've also provided input on potential park ownership transitions, including Dayton Landing and Crabtree Park. Looking ahead, we remain committed to public outreach and to exploring long-term strategies to strengthen our park system. While Parks Manager Travis and Public Works Director Marco have done excellent work with limited resources, many of our parks still reflect years of underinvestment. We are very grateful for the increased support we've seen since Commissioner Johnston became the liaison to the Parks Advisory Board. That kind of direct engagement makes a real difference, and we hope to continue building on that momentum. As the Parks Department works to address longstanding needs and improve park conditions, we encourage the Board of Commissioners to consider additional ways to support these efforts. In closing, Yamhill County Parks manages 18 properties totaling 272 acres, but only 83 of those acres are developed for public use. Even including all 272 acres, we rank just 26th in park acreage per person among the 35 Oregon counties. As our population grows, this underscores the need for thoughtful planning, equitable access, and meaningful investment. Enhancing and expanding our parks isn't just about recreation. It's about public health, environmental resilience, and ensuring that every resident, regardless of where they live or how they travel, has the opportunity to connect with nature and the community. Thank you again for letting me come in and speak with you today and for supporting the parks.
Absolutely. And I appreciate the editorial letter that you are sent into the News Register, and the dedication that you've had to the Parks Board since the beginning is phenomenal. So thank you for that.
Can I just jump in here? When I first became a commissioner, I was briefly the liaison to Parks and Public Works. And I have never seen the level of engagement since Chair Johnston took over. Not only has he really hit the ground running on involvement, but I've seen him out there and he has taken it to a whole new level as far as caring about the parks and being invested. And I can't say enough about the chair's involvement, and also appreciate the fact the volunteer hours that have gone in, because we haven't always had Parks Board members that were that invested or even constituted enough that we had enough Parks Board members. And so thank you all for Travis and Mark and Nessa and Chair Johnston to go out to some of those parks and to see. I mean, it's amazing what we have, and I hope that
The potential is huge for what we have.
It's amazing. So thank you. And
Yeah.
thank you, Commissioner Johnston.
Well, thank you.
I would say hopefully I wrote it down right, 646 hours, and being 2 board seats shy. I've been on a lot of boards and you can almost never get people to volunteer past showing up for the meeting. So very impressive and thank you to whoever's listening in that board for
Well, I would like to
showing
give
up.
credit to Mark and Travis on being really, really tight leaders too.
Yeah.
So a lot of that is because of their leadership.
Well,
So,
yeah, coast top down. So
Yeah.
good job, guys.
yeah.
Yeah.
All 3 of you.
And I will
Four of
say,
you.
the Parks Board, they'll find groups to volunteer for that really aren't even directly related to our own parks. And they did a bicycle volunteer rest stop here last year, I think.
I think
And-
was it last year?
It was last year.
And got paid $1,200 to do that. So just the engagement that the Parks Board has, I'm super impressed. So thank you guys again.
Thank you.
All right, up next, we have our work session. And here today is Lindsay Manfrin with discussion of behavioral health housing services grant funds. Welcome. Good morning.
I knew I saw you on the agenda.
Well, good morning. I know there was a request to have more information about where we are at with the House Bill 5202 behavioral health housing dollars. And it was my understanding that there would be a discussion on potential uses of the remaining funds. So that's what I'm prepared to speak to. I can give a little bit of an overview and then happy to answer questions or just move into some more dialogue around it. That sounds okay? Okay. So initially, we were awarded a little over $3 million to support behavioral health housing in Yamhill County. The funds were able to be used in a number of ways. They were able to be utilized for capital investments related to mental health residential treatment facilities, alcohol and drug treatment facilities, as well as like adult foster homes for individuals with mental illness, and housing supports for individuals that could look a lot of different ways, including things as not insignificant, but small from a dollar standpoint as like shower kits and things like that, and then all the way up to operational costs of supporting those types of housing programs. So a pretty large array of things the funds could be used for. At the initial award, we had planned to utilize the funds in a number of ways. Initially, $1.5 million were allocated to go through a community RFI process or RFP process, and the remaining funds were going to be used within Health and Human Services to bring on another transitional treatment and recovery home, a TTRS house. So I can give updates on where we stand with both of those pieces. The RFI went out, as you know. We funded 3 organizations initially, and 2 of those have already gone out, paid. That's happening. And then the other portion is still in our budget, and it is the unspent funds that we that was originally allocated through the YCAP contract. So those funds still remain. The funds that were staying within the Health and Human Services budget for the TTRS house expansion also remain. Those funds, initially we were not able to find a house. So the funding contributed to both supporting from an operational standpoint and staffing standpoint the additional home, but as well as the cost of purchase and renovation of a home. We have not been able to find a house to use those funds for. And so when we're thinking about the amount of funds we still have to obligate by December 31st of this year, which is when we need to obligate the funds or else we return them to the state, I would be including those funds because I think it's unlikely for us to find that house. And I think based on some of the other needs in the community that we have now that look different than 2 years ago, I would make some different recommendations to the board as well. And I'm happy to speak to those. So currently we have a little over $1.3 million that is unobligated. So there are a handful of things that we know are big community needs, and I'm happy to talk through some of those, and then maybe we can just go from there. One of the big needs that we have is related to secure or unsecure residential treatment facilities. We call these SRTFs or RTFs. These are homes for individuals who have mental illness or some sort of mental health need. These homes are not permanent. They are supposed to be sort of long-term transitions to stabilize individuals into other housing settings or into the community on their own. The capacity within the state is very small, and so oftentimes people stay longer than is intended because they don't have somewhere to go afterwards, or sometimes we just can't find placements. And so individuals that would really benefit from a housing setting of this nature, just it's not possible to put them there. So I think that is one area that our community and state in general needs more of. There have been some communities that have used these funds to do that. Marion County is one. They have a facility that will be opening, I think, next year. Like anything else, it takes a little while to build those things out, but that is, many communities have decided to invest in those areas. And at a recent conversation that I had with other community health program directors, the sort of consensus of the group was, even with what we know is coming online, there's still a need for more. So that's one bucket of things that I think could be considered. The other is the ongoing conversations that we have had about alcohol and drug or substance use disorder residential treatment. These funds cannot be used for medically managed withdrawal or detox, but they can be used for residential treatment for alcohol and drug use. So that is another area that we've had conversations about before that is allowable with these funds. The other thing that in talking with my team is a big need locally is a way to house the individuals in our community who we consider our aid and assist population. So these are individuals who have been deemed by the courts unable to aid and assist in their defense of whatever criminal charges they have before them because of their mental health. These individuals are sometimes going to the state hospital. When they come out, we don't always have great places to house them. And one of the things that we have talked about would be really wonderful would be to have not congregate housing. We don't think that that would be very a good idea with this population, but something that was like a small multiplex units where we would have places to house people, where we could have staff on site during daytime hours, similar to how we operate our transitional treatment and recovery homes, but for this specific population and in a slightly different setup, because those homes it's a congregate house, so people are sharing communal spaces and things. Whereas with this concept, it would be the staffing model would be the same in terms of having staff on site during the day, including weekends, but not necessarily 24/7, but thinking of it more as an apartment dwelling where people have their own space still. So those were the big things that came to me in terms of conversation with my team, but also conversations throughout the state, knowing what other projects are happening and where there still is need, even with some of those other projects. So happy to answer questions that you may have, however you'd like to take the rest of the conversation.
Yeah, I think right out of the gate, I'm listening to all the different ideas. Which one of those do you believe, and I know this is just going to be an opinion, would be the most sustainable funding wise after the initial grant fund was spent? So whether it's purchasing a house, but then how do we fund staff and upkeep on the properties? And
Yeah.
what do you see as the best one as being sustainable?
Absolutely. Good question. I think with any of these options, the sustainability would come through Medicaid billing. The majority of the people who are entering any of these types of services that I mentioned, whether it's the residential treatment facility or SUD treatment facility or the aid and assist housing, I think really these funds would be utilized to support capital. And then we would rely on largely Medicaid billing to help support the ongoing operational costs of the programs. I think one other thing to note, right, is we have to have the funds obligated by December 31st. All three of these things have been ongoing conversations, and all three have very different, are in sort of different stages of development from early on to later in terms of having things more fully fleshed out, or something like the aid and assist house is just easier to implement because that's a pickup and we know exactly how that would look. That would be an easy thing for us to say, we know what the model is, we can replicate the model, we've done the model before, just a slightly different population. And that would be something I would imagine Health and Human Services just managing like we do the other housing portfolio that we operate. Whereas with the other ones, I don't think that it would be wise, and would not be my recommendation for Health and Human Services to start providing outpatient residential treatment facilities or inpatient residential treatment facilities or secure residential treatment for mental health. So in those situations, we really would be looking to partner with other agencies who are interested, right? We do know that there are interested parties that have expressed a desire to operate these facilities, these types of facilities in Yamhill County. The other thing to note, when we're talking about the potential aid and assist housing project, we could do a lot of the work itself with $1.3 million. The other ideas thrown out would necessitate additional funds. The $1.3 million is not going to create any of those facilities on its own. So we would need to be looking to a partnership with other counties, with other organizations to also bring money to the table. That's not out of the question, right? These are conversations that happen regularly with community mental health programs across the state, especially our neighboring partners, as we're trying to figure out what are you doing, what are you doing. So it's not out of the question, but it is worth noting that that would require and necessitate additional contributions from other people.
Okay, why don't you go ahead, because I've got a really long list of questions.
Commissioner.
Go ahead. You're good?
Okay, I got another one then.
Okay.
So with the last comment that you just made, it seems like it's coming down to where this is gonna have to be a program that we're gonna have to tip up in-house. Because if we're gonna start working with other cities or other counties to find funding for some of the other programs, the timeline doesn't fit with that. Unless whatever the definitions are of obligated by December 31st, and then we can still be having conversations on what a bigger program looks like after that.
Yeah, I would let Ken and or Christian speak to the definition of obligated funds for sure. One thing I would note that is something to consider, knowing that any final decision would of course come before the board, either through just additional conversation such as this or contractual requirements of things that will come to you, is let me back up and just say, with any of these projects, it could be one thing that comes tomorrow that makes or breaks the project. And I never know when that's going to happen. And so one thing that we could consider is to continue to pursue, without any obligation on the county, but continue to pursue these different ideas to make sure that we don't end up in a space where we say, we're going to go full throttle here and not do any of the other things, and some barrier comes into this project that means we can't move forward. But instead of kind of moving all of these as we can to make sure that we can jump on that opportunity that may or may not come, I wonder if there's a way we could say these are the things that we would be interested in, and allow me to continue to, again, with no obligation to the county, but continue to proceed with the conversations I'm having in this setting, and this setting, and this setting, just to keep all things on the table so that we don't end up in a situation where something comes up in December and then we're back to the drawing board
Right.
trying to figure out what we can do.
And what does it look like too with combining possibly, I'm not saying we do this, but opioid settlement funding too? I don't know.
Yeah.
That's just
Depending
questions to be
on,
had and
yeah,
conversations around. So
depending on what's decided to pursue, that is a possibility.
Yep.
Yeah.
Commissioner.
Go ahead, Mary.
Uh,
Commissioner Sterrett, sorry.
Oh, okay, I have a lot of questions, so maybe we can just do lightning round on this so that we
Bet.
don't put everybody to sleep. A couple of things. We know that there is a bill which could substantially change 4002.
Yes.
And that might really talk about throwing a monkey wrench in things. But I want to be able to keep that in mind.
Sure.
The other thing is, I know of a certain county that has houses that they might be selling soon.
Okay.
And you might want to get in
Who's that?
touch with this
Be wonderful.
county and look at what they are.
Sounds great.
Some houses that might fit for a TTRS.
Already talked about that.
Okay,
I think to a limited degree.
okay.
Yes.
Because the TTRS programs, and even if we do, the men's only program, women's only program, even if whatever we do. And then the other question I had is, there's a new bill that could also substantially
Mhm.
change things, and that would change the civil commitment process.
Sure.
And that could give us a whole new set of clients and folks that need that help. The other question I had is, I've long been a proponent of getting rid of the certificate of need here in the state,
Yeah.
which would make it easier to build facilities that you couldn't build before. Have you looked at that and how that could impact what we want to do if we really want to go full tilt?
Yeah, I think there's certainly a lot of process when it comes to many of these things. I think the process is most arduous when we're talking about a hospitalization level of inpatient treatment. And so I think there is still significant process, but less so when we're talking about things like secure residential treatment facilities. So I think that those are easier to proceed with than some of the other inpatient pieces.
we've always had an issue with secure residential treatment. And now, of course, with the aid and assist situation and that whole decision, it's really, it's caused some issues. So one question, when Oregon State Hospital, so when that aid and assist patient is released and they have lost all their benefits while hospitalized, are they then eligible for Medicaid when they are in one of, let's say, our secure residential or residential?
Yes, people are eligible for Medicaid
Okay, so
anytime they're in those facilities.
you would have that piece covered.
Yes.
The other question is staffing wise.
Mhm.
So if we look at the staffing issues that we might have in behavioral health with what we have now, how can we address something where we really expand this?
Yeah. So couple of ways to answer that question. One is dependent upon what type of project we're talking about that would really emphasize what staffing is needed. And back to sort of thinking through who would be operating the services, right? If we're talking about secure residential treatment or residential treatment, whether for mental health or alcohol and drug use, really that would look like another provider providing that. So that doesn't mean that the staffing isn't an issue for them too. It just would not be our staffing that we would be thinking about. But certainly I would imagine that they would still be experiencing similar things that we do and other places do. As far as the TTRS concept for the aid and assist population and potentially even civilly committed. I mean, I think we could sort of expand beyond just aid and assist within this population we're talking about. Largely, we staff those programs in with staff that are easier to fill positions. So they are our qualified mental health associates, which are bachelor's level prepared mental health specialists, and peer support. So we find a lot of value in having peers working with our our clients. And so for example, our TTRS, they still go to our clinic, people who are in those homes, they go to the clinic to see their therapist, to see a psychiatric prescriber, if they are someone who is using medications, those types of things. So they're going to our clinic. And these are people who we're hoping are going to our clinic anyway. So it wouldn't require a need and expansion of those staff. What it would need would be the staff that are the qualified mental health associates and the peers, which are largely not positions that we struggle to fill. It really is the QMHPs, the qualified mental health professionals, which are the master's prepared like therapists. That is where our biggest deficit is and our biggest struggle.
Okay. Well, I have one more question. In the past, we've had, I think, great success, I would imagine, through the TTRS programs. What are we looking at in terms of capacity for those existing houses?
It's a good question. Right now, we're a little bit tight, but that's because we have one house offline, our biggest house offline, for some repairs. And we hope to get that up and running I'm not going to put a time, but we're hoping to get it back and up and running as soon as possible. And as soon as that does, I don't imagine that we will have capacity challenges with that program right now.
We've had really good success with our public-private partnerships for, all of the various projects, and we've worked with contractors and local contractors, and it's been great because we don't take on the risk going forward past a 5-year lease. Has there been discussion about bringing one of them or more back into a project like this?
Potentially, I think where we've had, where I would really highlight success with the TTRS houses and partnerships is our partnerships with Lutheran Community Services. They've been doing parent coaching, and that would not probably be something relevant to this project because they wouldn't have the children in the homes. However, that doesn't preclude us from thinking about what other partners would be of value and a service to bring on board to help provide some of the services in the house and the supports to the people for sure.
But I'm talking about the building part where we've had Hallworth come in.
Oh,
and we've
absolutely.
had those
I think
types
that's a
of.
possibility. I think there has been additional interest thrown out there of, if we are interested in doing something else that has been floated out there. So I think that it is within the realm of possibility to consider doing something like that, where instead of purchasing something, perhaps it is building it with a little bit more intentional design that could happen. Because again, if we're looking at sort of a modified TTRS program for a different population, we do think that having individual units versus congregate housing is important. So that's going to be a little harder to find. We know it's not easy to find because we're not, and we wouldn't be looking for, a 60-unit apartment complex. We'd be looking for one of those smaller, 4 to 6 bedroom places, which exist, but they're not on the market all that often. So we'd be looking at something like that, ideally. But yeah, I think that could be a possibility,
Thanks. Thank you.
and it has been very successful.
Commissioner.
What, I know that when we were talking about the opioid dollars and if we can tie some of this in, I don't know if you've had a chance to talk with the other counties or regional solutions or anything to that effect. But what is the temperature on that potential partnership? And
Yeah.
I agree that timeline is very short for a partnership. But
Exactly. Yeah, therein lies the challenge. There is significant interest from directors across the states, including the surrounding regions close to us, to invest in residential treatment for individuals where they can be managed when they have both mental health and alcohol and drug challenges. Right now, the way our system is designed, it is really difficult to find placements for people who are experiencing both. And as you can imagine, it's not infrequent that people are experiencing both. And so we struggle to place individuals in mental health facilities when they have alcohol and drug use challenges. And we struggle to put people in alcohol and drug residential treatment facilities when they have mental health challenges. And so really the consensus from the groups that I've been talking about is wanting to invest in facilities that can manage both simultaneously. That seems to be the biggest gap. And there's a lot of consensus around that. There has been discussion at a really high level that I have heard of working with our CCOs from the governor's office, working with the CCOs to potentially build in budget notes around some of these types of things. I have no idea if that will ever come to fruition or even what the process would look like. Obviously, if that was something that would come to fruition, that would need complete support from y'all. But these are all, again, these just little pieces that are floating around out there and nothing has quite come to fruition yet, but all things that I'm paying close attention to.
And how many ideally units would you want? Like, I'm gonna call them apartments, but
Yeah.
how many doors would you want?
I
in a
think
perfect world?
it's like 6 to 10 would probably be good.
But we could look at it as 6 to 10 beds.
Yes. Mhm.
Ken, what does it look like for these funds to, Commissioner Starrett brought this up, the funds being paid to the county for purchase of property? Is that a possibility?
I don't know. It's a question I'd have to look at the funds and
I'm like arm's length transaction. Is this weird that the funds are with the county designated for purchase of property, but then we're writing the county a check?
yeah, I made a note. I'll make another
Okay.
question and I'll
I
probably.
I think like right
I'm
now,
looking at Christian.
out of everything that I've heard would be the most burning question for me to guide in which direction we should go is what that looks like.
Because I could see, safely, I could say, like if we were looking at developing a property that's currently in county ownership and using this for the capital improvements to that property, but as far as, I'll have to take a note. It seems like it's a little close
Yep.
to basically
Yeah, I mean, off the top of my head, transferring it to ourselves for
selling it to
X
ourselves.
amount
You're
of
basically,
dollars, I think is probably not something that would pass muster, but we can look at it. But as Ken said, we could certainly use the money. I think what I'm
upgrade.
seeing in the contract for any renovations and
Absolutely.
Okay.
any repurposing, and for the operational and administrative costs. So, if we couldn't use it to, acquire or sell ourselves a piece of our own property,
Right.
I think we could use the entire amount then to perhaps further out into the future for some of the operational expenses.
Well, not operational, because that was the first question I had was the sustainability of this, and it sounds like Medicaid would cover most
Yes,
programs.
and we can use, these funds can be used for operational costs to administer the programs. I just don't know if we're able to obligate future staffing costs.
Well, and
That's the
and that
challenge I
was
have.
more,
with
my
Deborah.
personal opinion was, I want to make sure it's sustainable. I don't want to
absolutely.
rely on grant funding for sustainability because we're
Yeah.
running into,
Right.
not we, but nationally, people relied on grant funding and here we are, it's not sustainable. So I want to make sure that we are hyper-focused on that and make sure there's sustainability after we step something up. So
Absolutely.
anyway,
And then as far as looking at existing inventory or properties or things that we have, I think it really comes down to, again, what is needed for each of these these three different programs or
Mhm.
these three different settings, and trying to do an assessment of the buildings.
it
And
sounds.
whether or not they would be a true match, or if it, I don't know, because,
Or a tear down and build.
or a tear down and redevelop a lot,
And zoning.
Yes, to be mindful of all of that.
Well,
yeah.
Well, we can look
and
at
maybe,
them.
and maybe part of this conversation might come up on the 8th with our joint meeting. So, okay, cool. Any other questions?
Commissioner Johnson, you had a question about what needs to happen with the funds by the end of this year. So it defines an obligation, and the funds need to be obligated by the end of the year. And this is, typical government contract language. An obligation is an order placed for property and services and entering into contracts, subawards, and similar transactions that require payment. So basically, I think we'd have to have the funds contracted
Yeah.
and committed to an expense. I don't know that answers the
Okay.
question about committing future, personnel and operational costs, but we can certainly look at that.
Okay.
So it doesn't look like we have to have it spent, we just have to have it contracted for, is what I would say by the end of the year.
Yeah, it's still tight.
Yeah,
It's
pretty tight.
Very tight, yeah.
And then something else to consider too is for expenditures for real property, for buying, renovating, or improving, if it's $100,000 or more, we also have to go back to OHA and through DOJ and to enter into a declaration of restrictive covenant on the property. And that took several months to get through. But I don't think that would be an issue once we're under contract. So if we're under contract and then it takes an additional 3-6 months, however long to get that covenant in place, I think we're good.
What's the second fit? Let's assume all the stars align and we find a project and we obligate it. What's the next time frame that we'd be up against? Is it 2 years after that to
Is there a
expend?
spend by?
I don't think there's a spend by. I think it's just the obligated by, unless Christian, you're seeing
No,
additional
I'm not-
language.
I haven't seen anything that says
Yeah.
they need to be spent by a deadline.
That
Okay.
was a
It's
US
obligated.
Treasury, if you're thinking of
Yeah.
ARPA funds.
Oh, yeah.
That they had a obligate by and a spent by 2
Yeah.
dates. That was specific.
Now,
to
there are
Okay.
reporting
those programs.
requirements.
Yes,
don't
I
know.
was just going to share, we do quarterly reports, and so that will maintain, as long as we have the funds, the obligation to do quarterly reports. And then, of course, at any point, any uncollected funds could be any unspent funds could be recollected at any point through like a biennial process, which doesn't happen often, but it is just, it's a risk that we have.
Okay, anything else?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Will
And just
do.
to make sure I'm clear, I want to make, were any of those projects things that you would be uncomfortable pursuing? Just if I continue to try to work all three of them to figure out which one's going to come to fruition most likely?
I do have one more clarifying question on the, in terms of the foster homes that we
Yeah,
have for
another
some
option.
of our aid and assist folks or as a
Mhm.
potential, could we stand up another one of those? Or could we contract with someone to have another adult foster home?
Yeah, I think that is another big need. It feels a little out of our control in that it's really dependent on finding the foster provider. So I think that if we are able to find one or one that would like to expand, I do think that that would be a great use of these funds as well.
Excellent. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I think just for me, for clarification, I'm looking for sustainability
Mhm.
and I would lean towards third-party operated. So we didn't have to worry about personnel.
Yep.
So,
I agree with the,
okay,
the third party operated for sure.
fantastic.
Is there a priority that, I mean, that would be the other way to just kind
Yeah.
of help shape this, is the board have one that kind of stands out more than the other to,
So I would like to utilize, if we have something already, and Commissioner Sterrett brought this up with properties that we already have. And again, sustainability of the program, and then third party, however it fits, whatever program fits the best for a third party operated. That would be like my parameter. So if you want to pick whichever program you believe would fit best into that and focus on that, I'm okay with that.
I
Oh.
would just say all of the above and SRTF.
Yeah.
So
Needed.
basically secure residential,
Yeah.
which we really need, and we might even really need after
Need
some
more,
of this
yeah.
legislation, but also all of those qualifiers.
Okay, great.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with any of that. I think that they're all big needs. So I think really what's most feasible and to pull
Sure.
off within a short time frame
Okay.
or to allocate funds or.
Okay, well,
Fantastic.
if there are any big developments, I will make sure that we go through the right channels to bring that back to you. And certainly if there are questions along the way or if you want updates at some point, let me know and I'd be happy to share.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thanks.
All right, up next we have G is our consent agenda. I would move approval with one correction, and I may have an old agenda here, but it's an appointment of Russ Thomas to the Road Improvement Advisory Committee, not a reappointment. But other than that, I would move approval with corrections. Is there any further discussion?
None.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Item H is old business. H1 is consideration to authorize Yamhill County Solid Waste to submit 5 funding authorization forms and determine which authorization level, full, partial, or none, should be given for each funding category for each service provider or other entity in regards to transportation, contamination evaluation, contamination reduction programming, recycling service expansion identified in the needs assessment, and purchase of post-consumer recycled content collection containers that are due to DEQ by March 31st, 2025, which has been extended to April 15th.
That is correct.
Okay.
And I do
And this has been continued from March 27th.
Yes, thank you for continuing that. I
Yeah,
was-
no worries. Glad you're feeling better.
Thank you. And I do have Dan Blue from Recology on.
Okay.
so
Do you want to
if-
kick us off with an update, or do commissioners have some hot questions right now to get it going?
I have a lot of questions, but I will let you
Yeah,
guys
I
go
think I
first.
prefer the update.
Okay.
first, and then-
You want to give us a little rundown on this?
Synopsis.
Sure.
So basically, the state has the RMA, the Recycling Modernization Act. And so now there's going to be a statewide recycling collection list that all counties and cities will have the same items that are collected statewide. So that way, everybody is doing the same process. And so part of that, the PRO, which is a nonprofit organization that's administering this for DEQ, has these 5 funding categories that the local governments or who they authorize are able to get reimbursement for fees that already occur, or for example, the contamination reduction programming, the $3 per capita for certain programs and elements that would need to be completed. So DEQ is asking us to determine what level of authorization for each of those 5 funding categories for each of the service providers or other entities that we have in our area.
Commissioner, what do you got? Well, I'll kick it off. So I sent an email yesterday, kind of get a little bit of background on this, and I've seen a couple out of some of the other city council meetings, approval of this. It seems like we're just an intermediary for this. It ultimately has to go to Recology or Waste Management. So my question to you yesterday was if there's a cost, if we do a no evaluation, I think it was basically a non, if there was cost to the county, and ask Ken the same thing, what the cost would be for us to administer if we kept the funds for the year and then sent it off. Are we evaluating what Recology or Waste Management would send to us and then approve an invoice and then send a check to them? Do you know kind of the process and how that's gonna?
So I did receive your email yesterday and went over it. As far as I understood, I reached out to Circular Action Alliance, who is the pro that would be doing that. And they said they would get back to me. So they are working on a payment portal that would go through, but essentially, if we were to do no authorization at this point, there'd be some type of process or procedures we would have to then develop to go over to make sure, like, so for transportation, that could be a reimbursement cost if they're transporting that material more than 50 miles. So if it's less than 50 miles, they don't qualify for that reimbursement. But if it's more than 50 miles, they do. So then the service provider would then need to provide documentation to us that the mileage met a certain way, the material that was transported was what needed to be, and have all that documentation. And then whatever procedure, we would then review it, make sure that we believe that it meets the statute, and that we would send that over to the Circular Action Alliance. They would have their procedure, I'm assuming, and then would send that back to us. And that was my question to them, was how would that work?
So to the opposite of this now, if we do full, is there still reporting to us that we sign off on to where then we need to claim admin costs to facilitating this? I see Jody's got some.
We don't know, but probably, because we would have to do what would otherwise be done at the level above us by the pro.
So to me, it almost sounds like if nobody knows, we should just delay this till April 15th to see if they extend it again. And why would we make a decision based on not being able to answer questions?
Well, we wouldn't know until we came up with our own procedures. So if we want to take control of this and sort of come up with a plan for how we're going to distribute the money, then we need to come up with the plan.
So somewhere in the protocols of being able to develop our own plan, can we recoup
within-
admin
No.
costs?
I doubt it.
Admin costs cannot be recouped.
I have a couple of questions because on some of this talks about a reporting by the 31st, a plan by the 31st. And then there's that April 15th, and I'm wondering a couple of things. Do we know if that was arbitrary? And then having passed the March 31st deadline, what was our obligation and what can we kick down the road? The other thing is it stipulates that we complete a 2023 needs assessment survey. And did we do that as a county? Or is that because this is so convoluted, and all you have to do is go back to the original bill, and the bill is probably, if under the category of the stuff we're seeing coming out of Salem, like this session, which is absolutely lunacy, this bill actually is so complex, where it talks about equity studies and having to come up with an equity study and basically having DEQ able to just come on a property unannounced. I mean, there's just so much in this bill that's horrifying, but now we are left with the fallout of how to implement this, and it's an unfunded mandate. So a couple of questions that I would have is how much for our county? Because in Polk County, I think it's around $4,000. If the cities over 40,000 are already doing this, why is that incumbent upon the county then? If the cities over 40,000 are already doing that? And then I have questions about the funding and the haulers needing to get any requests for increases. So when we look at this, we can pick one like full authorization, which means we have no county involvement. But then again, what are we doing to ourselves down the road when there's so many unanswered questions?
Liability that we're taking
The
on.
liability of this. It's just, this is one of those things where if you read the bill, you're thinking, this is not even, yeah, I mean, just read the bill and then come back and try to make some sense of this.
So the $3 per capita, and it was around 20,000 or 80,000 and change. Is that funding set and would come to us, and those are the funds that then would get dispersed for the 5 different programs, whether it's recycling containers or transportation reimbursement?
So the $3 per capita is under the contamination reduction programming, and that is one funding
Specific to
category
that then?
itself.
No transportation specific to
No
that.
transportation, nothing. And then under that, there's 3 areas of programming that have to be implemented. And under those 3 programs, there's elements under each one of those.
So then then it would come to transportation, it would be then the transportation company, as long as they came within the parameters of under 50 miles or whatever
Over
it
50
was.
miles.
They're then creating their invoice, sending it to, we don't know yet, whether it's us and our program that we're stepping up or directly to the nonprofit. And then,
If I can provide any sort of help in this realm, this is an assumption on my part, so don't take this as for like gospel. My belief is they added in local government as an option because of the bigger counties. So they do have their own programs that they like to implement. The statute reads in a way where littler governments like us can pass this on and just let the service providers work directly with them. But we have to decide to do that. It's I guess it'd be an opt-out rather than an opt-in.
and if we opt out with the full authorization, is there no liability with that opt-out?
Let me
Financially,
figure out where the liability would land. Liability to whom?
to us?
For what?
Oh, let's say a trucking company is under the 50 miles. They send an invoice in and they're like, wait a second, the nonprofit's like, no, we're not covering that whole thing. And now they're going to come looking at the county for $100,000 bill to cover trucking.
I would say that the only way I could see that happening is if we were the ones who decided to
If we
administer
kept
the
it.
funds.
Yes,
Yeah.
okay.
But
But you're still running on assumptions.
well, because this
We
is
don't know. Yeah.
uncharted territory. There we go.
Regarding those reimbursements or any admin costs, it talks about the pro would fund in advance or reimburse us for eligible expenses of a local government. Now, what is that? Does that include admin costs for us to administer any of this? Is that, and then it falls upon the producer responsibility organization to fund that. And how do we assess that? And how do we determine what our admin costs are? So,
Our admin costs would not be reimbursed.
Yeah,
Well-
the eligible costs, it's defined under OARs.
so the eligible cost would not include, because it says eligible expenses of a local government. That
Mhm.
doesn't, that
I-
specifically says
I'm
no.
going to
ad-
trust Ashley. I haven't reviewed enough of the OARs.
I understand that, like, if we give no authorization and we were to process everything, and then go to the pro, our admin cost would not be covered.
Okay, because we would need to find where that is because there is, again, I'm just going back to the actual bill itself, talking about reimbursing us for eligible costs. But until we define our terms, I don't know. I'm not comfortable making any kind of a
I'm going to have Dan chime in here based on our conversation
Okay.
that we've had, and maybe he's got something to add to the conversation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Hang on a second, Dan.
Okay.
We're still working on it, Dan. Hang on a second. Oh, you're muted, Dan. Try that.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Still nothing.
Still
Hang
nothing?
on. We'll get there.
While they're doing that, I do just want to bring up the fact that this is an annual decision that the board will make. This is not one and done. So every year you're going to have to make this decision, at least until the law changes.
Can you hear me now?
Thanks for rubbing it in. Dan, can you try talking again?
Can you hear me now?
Nothing. Hang on a second. We won't have
Can
these
you hear me
problems
now?
in the new room 32.
Oh, it will be Utopia.
Oh my gosh.
We're still working on it, Dan. Hang tight.
Sing a song, Dan.
Okay,
they
can you hear me now?
Just hear you when they pop up.
I'm sorry, one more time.
Okay.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Still working on it. Did he just? Oh, he's going to try logging back in.
Can you hear me now? Hello? Good morning. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Hold tight, Dan.
Can you hear me now?
So if Noelle can hear him, Jody, can you hear him on your laptop? I'm just wondering if we can, yeah, or whatever Noelle's hooked into. Yeah. See if we can do a little back feed.
I might be able to.
I'm still here. I can hear you, but I don't think you can hear me.
I'm hoping this isn't going to create some feedback.
Hello?
Yo, there we go.
Oh, you heard me?
Yep, we got it.
Oh, great. Good morning,
Sorry about
commissioners.
that.
No worries at all.
That'll be the last time that happens because I'm going to take a sledgehammer to it when we're done.
Well, I will be honest that I was listening, but I'm also in another event, but I'm here for you right now. How can I be of assistance?
Did you hear?
Commissioners?
Yeah. Did you hear any of the past conversation for maybe last 15 minutes about?
I did. Yeah.
Anything to add to that or clarifications of anything?
Yes, I think you all asked a lot of great questions, and I agreed overall that this is a very complicated rollout of a complicated legislation. What I understand is that the funding authorization is the first step in a process that will deliver more details when we actually get to the next phase, which is the funding agreement phase. And that would be, depending on how you decide to move forward, the funding agreements would be sort of a legal contract between either the county and the Circular Action Alliance, or if you delegate the funds, authorize those funds to come directly to one of your service providers, WM or us, then the service provider would enter into a contract with the Circular Action Alliance. With entering into that contract, the service provider would take responsibility for reporting, liability, obligation to utilize the funds as directed by the RMA. And for us, in most cases, we are not shipping beyond 50 miles. And so there wouldn't be transportation reimbursement. In some cases, there may be, depending on the commodity. The $3 per capita is really where I think, and I recommend this, that where the county focus their time, because that is, $3 per year for per capita that is obligated to be used for contamination reduction, education, and outreach. We don't exactly know, as Ashley said, how that money has to be used, but we think it's going to be similar to what is currently required of us and you to educate residents about contamination, recycling properly, et cetera. We think there may be room for some investment in technology that might help with contamination reduction, but those are still to be determined. So this is just the first step. To answer your question, Commissioner, the 15th is now the official deadline to submit. It was the 31st. So I feel like this is not that risky for the county, in my opinion. But I understand the confusion with this, and I hope that helps a little bit, but I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
What happens if we don't decide today and we go beyond the 15th?
That's a good question, but I know that I don't think they're going to extend beyond the 15th. That's my opinion. I think that you may lose the opportunity for this year's funding cycle because then the next step then becomes that funding agreement process, and we can't move forward with the funding agreement if they haven't received the funding authorization. And I also want to just say that the obligations of the RMA are the governments, whether it be county or city or regional. We're the service provider acting on your behalf. So if you would like us to be the recipient of those funds, we will come back to you next year and report exactly how those funds were utilized and how we covered the reporting obligations on your behalf to DEQ.
And I'm just going to, not knowing enough to say yes or no, my presumption is if we don't decide, we will pass on those funds, which would really be a detriment to the providers, not necessarily.
Right.
And we would, and just so everyone's clear, if for example, you fully authorize Recology to be the recipient of those per capita funds, is what I refer to them as, we would bundle those funds along with what we're receiving from all of the smaller cities within Yamhill County and McMinnville. If they, again, elect to direct it to us, we would bundle it. We would develop a program that would be similar to what we already do, but it would be like program plus more. And then we would come back, like I said, and report annually our expenditure of those resources to you through our financial reporting process.
I also think it's worth noting that the $3 per capita, that's in unincorporated.
Right.
So it's not,
cities,
yeah.
which leads me to my next question, Dan. Did City of McMinnville approve theirs, and what option did they choose?
My understanding is that McMinnville this year is going to take those funds in-house. And if I understood their public works director correctly, then convey that money back to us. As was said earlier, this is an annual decision. It's for the next 12-month cycle. And then next year we would do this whole thing again. So you have the opportunity to either designate us to receive it this year and then evaluate how that goes, or take it in-house yourself and you know, you would then have some of those administrative costs that you talked about in terms of managing the funds, either rolling out your own program or then giving the money back to us and having us do it with an extra step in that process. But you have that just applies for this year.
Right.
Is that because McMinnville has a robust recycling program in place already, or, you know?
I think it is because they have more dollars, right? They may have some more staff capacity in their city to be able to manage those funds. But again, I think they're planning to take it in and then just farm it back out to us in this first year initially.
Are the funds, if they're kept in-house, for example, the way the city of McMinnville wants to do it, is it a one-time in and then a year later the funds are written out to you guys as one invoice, or is it a weekly, monthly bill that you'll be sending in? Can you kind of give us some background on how that would work?
Yeah, that's a level of detail that we don't have enough information on yet to be able to respond to that. I apologize.
No, that's fine. Any other questions?
None for me.
I have a couple of questions. So thank you, Dan. Question about the needs assessment survey. Is that something that you've already filled out on your end?
I could defer to Ashley on this one, or I know that Yamhill County has submitted it was called the ORSOP, Oregon Recycling System Plan, and it was the second of 2 surveys. And the way it was rolled out, you had to complete the survey to make it to the next step, which is where we're at with the funding authorizations. And that survey was completed in collaboration with us. Like we communicated about that.
Yeah, so that needs assessment survey was completed back in 2003. And then that was essentially asking what items, based on this expanded list of items, what potential you may see that the county. So if you may need more trucks for picking up more recycling, more containers, expanding a depot size, or in some instances, like counties that didn't have recycling, it was purchasing property, putting in a depot.
Did you say 2003?
23.
23.
Oh,
I
okay.
probably did
Oh.
say 2003, but I meant
23.
2023. So, and that had to be completed to be so even to get to this point for this funding, you had to complete that to be able to get to the funding.
And maybe this is for Daniel. Would you, if you get the funding, do you need to request any increases?
No, this is rate neutral. Like we would take whatever actual dollars, and that's simple calculation of unincorporated Yamhill County customers. I'm sorry, per capita unincorporated Yamhill County times 3, and we would just take that funding and we would apply it a set of contamination reduction, education, outreach resources. Think tabling. Think maybe doing some curbside surveying, make sure that there's not contaminants in the carts. Maybe some additional advertisements in local newspapers, that sort of thing, kind of consistent with what we already do. So again, it would be education and outreach on contamination reduction plus additional this year if we were to receive those funds directly.
And then when you guys do come out, you already have a program in place for education outreach, but then does that now put us in the middle of it having to approve any new outreach and whatever that program looks like? Or is it strictly just still, here's the funds?
I believe the terms of the franchise allow flexibility in terms of how we do education and outreach. I think it's more being consistent with what DEQ is expecting and anticipating that the funds are used for. But again, it's a fairly narrow topic area of contamination reduction of commingled recycling. So it's what you put in that recycling cart at your home or what businesses put in a mixed recycling cage at their place of business.
Any other questions?
No, thank you. And thank you, Ashley. Thanks, Daniel.
Thank you, Dan.
You're welcome. I apologize I couldn't be there in person.
No worries. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Man, I hate going into unknowns like this. I feel like the lesser liability is going to be just approving it full and letting Recology and Waste Management deal with it for the first year versus us bringing this in-house. I feel like the liability is going to be less doing that.
Yes, definitely on the liability.
if-
Also, the burden on Ashley would be pretty. So what would happen is we would enter into an agreement with DEQ that would lay out probably the specifics of what our program has to do. And then we would set up a program probably through Ashley, because honestly, I doubt there's enough money in unincorporated Yamhill County to have anyone else to hire somebody to do this work. And then when we decide how to grant out the money that we have, we would enter into agreements with them. So we enter an agreement with the state, and that's where we figure out what we can fund under our program. And then we would pass those obligations on to the service providers. So what purpose would we have in the middle? I don't know. I know at the bigger counties, they like to control their service providers, and, control the recycling that's happening within their communities. So I get why sort of bigger governments would find value in overseeing the program themselves. But we are a small county, and we don't know how burdensome this would be, but it would be annually at least. And there would probably be reporting requirements. There certainly would be grant agreements, stuff like that. And so my opinion is rather than have the service providers miss out on a full year of funding, let them try it out, see if it's worth it. And then next year we can come back and say, hey, you know what, we might want to take some control back, because we can take some control and not all control. And then at that point, once we know what we're dealing with, we have a better idea of how much it would cost us to implement the program here versus just letting them work directly with the state. That is my personal opinion, though. How you guys want to proceed is totally your call.
Just to clarify on that, if we do, if we were, the contract is with the pro, not the state.
Sorry, my bad.
But
With
just
the pro.
just for the clarification. And a lot of this too, how I kind of initially looked at this is like transportation. The cost of that already is the service provider. It's not at the county level. So this, with the funding, they would be eligible for reimbursement.
Yes, that's a good point. I think I inferred that we would find a way to pay some sort of county expenses. I agree. I don't think I'm seeing anything in statute or the OARs that would allow us to recoup our costs for implementing a program. So the money would go directly to the service providers, and we'd have to eat any administrative costs.
Is there, I guess I don't know how many per capita are in unincorporated. How much money are we talking about?
About 80 grand. It's 20,000 and change. Not account, well, it'd be accounts or service.
So it is
Service,
per
addresses.
capita.
20,300 something.
And yeah, it was about, the 2020 census was about 26,842. So it's about $80,000, $81,000. And if that was authorized to the service providers, it would be split between the service providers,
For each of the separate categories.
just for the contamination reduction.
Just for contamination.
I think you go with the path of, least liability, I guess, and learn what we don't know over the next year.
Dangerous. I hate not knowing.
Yeah, I have grave concerns because the devil is always in the details, but I, at this point, would opt for no county involvement. That's what my recommendation would be. Again, this is sort of one of those things is we have to see what happens, but it's not a good place to put a local government in. And so,
Especially when you have questions like, well, we're still working on that.
yeah,
So full authorization is the least involvement of the county, correct? Okay, so I'd make a motion that we authorize the full level of authorization for each category and each service provider for transportation, contamination evaluation, contamination reduction programming, recycling service expansion identified in the needs assessment, and purchase of post-consumer recycled content collection containers that are due to the DEQ by April 15th.
Can I ask one clarifying question before you?
Is there any
Second.
further discussion? Go ahead.
There was mention of reporting from the service providers. If you would like that to be part of your board order, include that in your motion.
Along with yearly report from the service providers. Okay. As amended. Motion's amended. Any further discussion?
None.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much, Ashley.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Ashley.
guys.
Thanks, Dan, if you're still on. Nope, gone. Okay. Holy smokes.
Yeah.
All right, moving on to H2, consideration approval of ordinance 941 in the matter of amending the Yamhill County Parks Code, the Wheatland Boat Ramp parking regulations, and the Rogers Landing Park fee schedule, declaring an emergency and setting the effective date. This has been continued from February 27th. Travis is here if we got any questions. None. I just have one. I want to make dang sure that the fee schedule is separated from this to where we can deal with the fee schedule later.
Tis indeed.
Okay,
Well, I mean, you can amend it via a board order.
Yep.
You don't have to go through an ordinance.
perfect.
Yes, that is how it is set up.
All right, I would move approval. Is there any further discussion?
Wait, wait, it's an ordinance. We have to do readings.
Oh,
So unless there's any objection, I'll read it by.
There
title.
is no objection.
Thank you. In the matter of amending the Yamhill County Parks Code and the Wheatland Boat Ramp parking regulations, repealing the Rogers Landing Park fee schedule, declaring an emergency and setting the effective date. In the matter of amending the Yamhill County Parks Code and the Wheatland Boat Ramp parking regulations, repealing the Rogers Landing Park fee schedule, declaring an emergency and setting the effective date.
I would move approval. Any further discussion?
None.
None? Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much.
Well done.
Thank you.
Do we need to set an effective date or no? It's emergency right now. Cool. All right. I like my job. All right, we're on to other business now. I1, consideration of approval in the matter of adopting the family and medical leave policy.
Do you guys want to come up or do you want me to take this?
Only if we have
Do you guys
questions.
have
Does anybody have questions?
I don't have a question.
I would move approval of.
Go ahead.
Any further discussion?
Yeah, for this one, for setting the effective date, I'm gonna ask to make sure we can comply with CBA requirements and posting requirements that an effective date be April 18th, 2025. That'll enable us to share with the associations and before it becomes effective.
Cool. Motion's been made. No further discussion?
None for me.
None?
no.
None? Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to I2, consideration of approval in the matter of adopting the Yamhill County whistleblower policy. Any questions on this one?
None.
No.
I would move approval. I do
Same.
have, one-
And I'd say same
April
thing,
18th.
effective date,
oh,
April 18th,
okay. Is that good enough or do you want that part of the motion?
please.
Okay. You want me to back up and do I1 again or, because I did not state April 18th, but you did.
I'm looking at council.
What was the
I didn't
question?
state the effective date for item I1 to
You
April
can
18th.
just have a second emotion after that. So adopt your first one and then say, set the effective date of whatever the board order is to
For both.
4/18.
Okay. All right. So I made a motion. I do have further discussion. I'm looking at the language on 3.07 of replacing disciplinary with termination. knowing that it would be covered by 3.08 if that's not the correct terminology. And what I'm going for is just how it's read to be, if you are basically lying about your situation that came about that you had to whistleblow and you're
Are you talking about,
fabricating a lie, that why wouldn't it just read termination?
I don't know if we want to, you know, there's a due process involved in most terminations. And so just discipline as a general term, because a lot of terminations, without getting into the nitty gritty, can be overturned if we don't follow through on due process, regardless of what's in our policies.
Mhm.
So putting discipline in there is probably more appropriate, just because we can't jump to termination immediately.
Would termination be included in the definition of disciplinary?
Correct.
Okay.
Typically, formal discipline includes up
Ter-
to and including.
We can amend the
termination.
policy to add that language, including,
I would do that. I just want the language in there because that's pretty egregious to lie about or accuse. And
agreed. So,
even though I know that by the time you get to 3.08, it would have covered any, if termination wasn't correct, 3.08 would have covered that.
what I would recommend is while your first motion's pending, make a motion to amend section 3.07, subsection A, to include the words up to and including termination.
Okay, so moved, amended, and I'm going to add also effective date April 18th for item I2 and I1 to clean that up, right?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay.
Okay.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
That was the amendment that passed. Now we need another vote on the actual approval
The policy.
of the policy.
So moved. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Motion
Yay.
passes
Yay.
unanimously.
Parliamentary procedure. Good job.
Thanks for your guidance.
Oh,
Yes. Took a
Strained her
class.
arm there pretty good.
Took a class.
I'll After that on record.
Signed in crayon or? Okay, moving on. Item I4. Item I3, consideration approval in the matter of adopting the Yamhill County campsite removal and property storage policy. Is there any questions on this?
None.
I have some questions about the eating part. How
You
do
wanna
you- how do you-
Make a motion?
Make the motion.
Okay.
I'll make a
Any
motion.
further discussion?
Yeah, I have a question about the eating part. Just where it, temporary place to eat, sleep, or live. How do you identify if a person is camping by eating?
sir. I think that language is straight from the statute, but let me double check that. Pause. Give me
Hold,
2
please.
seconds.
Jeopardy music?
How much time do you need? Because can we skip around here?
Okay.
Do we have to rescind motion before we move on?
Yes.
You want to rescind your motion?
I'll rescind my motion. for
Okay,
now.
we're gonna move on while Jody's looking that up. We're gonna go to I4. Consideration approval in the matter of formally adopting the Yamhill County Employee Handbook Policy effective April 18th, 2025. I would make a motion to approve this. Any further discussion?
Yes, Chair. I have a question and some clarification. Ultimately, this is regarding social media posting. Ultimately, you are solely responsible for what you post online. Before creating online content, consider some of the risks and rewards. Keep in mind that any of your conduct that adversely affects your job performance, the performance of coworkers, or otherwise adversely affects our citizens or people who work on behalf of Yamhill County or Yamhill County's legitimate business interests may result in disciplinary action up to including termination. Now, here's the part that I would like some clarification on, because the past is prologue here. Express only your personal opinions. Never represent yourself as a spokesperson for Yamhill County. If Yamhill County is a subject of the content you're creating, be clear and open about the fact that you are a Yamhill County employee. Make it clear that your views do not represent those of Yamhill County or the employees or elected officials. So my question has to do with social media, and it also has to do with comments that are quoted in a publication of record. How do we address those, and what are the sidebars? We want to certainly keep an eye on and be respectful of the First Amendment, but we also want to make sure that when there's a posting on social media, when there's a comment in a newspaper, how do we recognize that employees might do that? And what are the restrictions that could be more clear than this?
More clear than what was provided in there?
Well, it's never represent yourself as a spokesperson for Yamhill County. If it's the subject of the content you're creating, be clear about the fact that you are an employee and make it clear that your views do not represent Yamhill County. So my question is, what is the latitude when a comment is made, either online or in a newspaper, where it is acknowledged that the person is either in the employ, has been in the, is in the employ of the county in an official capacity and is making comments?
The intent of this language is not, because employees have First Amendment rights and they can represent and voice their opinions when they're off the clock. Where the caveat and what that language is trying to resolve is they're not speaking on behalf of the county or stating a position as representing the county, that they can, have their opinions, but they're not posting that on behalf of Yamhill County, on behalf of the Yamhill County Sheriff's Office, on behalf of, the Board of Commissioners, that they're not stating that, they can have their opinion the whole. And I'll look to council to weigh in on this as well, but the intent is not to interfere with protected rights when they're not on the clock and they're on their own time. They participate in the public process and make their opinions known. It's if it's being conveyed that this is, or not being clarified, that I'm not speaking on behalf of Yamhill County or the Board of Commissioners when I'm making this opinion. And it's a difficult area to navigate, and we think this language, it's intended to both protect employees and protect the county equally, that we're not in a position of, potentially going on record on a statement that's contrary to the county's position. I don't know.
So
And
is this setting up disciplinary action, I guess, if something happens, or what?
I mean, it's within the section called prohibited postings, right?
Yeah.
And that first paragraph explains when an employee might be subject to discipline. I think what it's also intended to do, and if I'm not mistaken, this parts of the handbook were taken from some draft materials that we got from CIS.
Correct.
And the goal is to also make sure that when employees have their own postings, that it's clear that they're not county postings, right? So trying to make sure that we have a clear separation between the two. That's how I read that.
So that when we wrote this was taken from a CIS handbook. The purpose of it is to prevent harassment and discrimination against employees using social media. But also, we do not want them putting words out on social media in any way representative of county opinion. If they do that currently, we have no way to stop them or hold them accountable for it. With this, we will have the ability to discipline.
So does that extend to comments that are made in a publication of record? Because I don't see that called out here specifically.
Publication of record. Like, are you
So if
thinking like
something's
the-
in a newspaper.
This is about social media, so I would not put newspaper comment sections under social media. What would happen is if we saw somebody, I don't want to get too into the legal strategy of that, but we could make an argument that if we find something under a comment section, under some website somewhere, we would have to somehow find a way to define that as a social media account. But that would be our obligation.
Okay, so we should probably have a separate category to include that. I would imagine if we don't want to call it social media, then we would call it media, a more broad.
Yes, we could. I'm just thinking,
How do you hold the paper accountable? I mean, I think we've all been kind of taken out of context a little bit. And
It's not,
It would be the poster, I guess.
it's not about context so much because that train has left the station. If we think we're going to get
well, that's what I mean.
accurate report, it's not going to happen. What I would like to make sure is that we do have something that enables us to address the fact that if an employee makes a comment and the quote is in a publication of record, that we have something that says, you can't do that if you have not made it clear that you are not representing the county. And that is a gray issue, a gray area, because when somebody makes a comment and a comment is made, for instance, that person works for the county, then that distinction has pretty much not been made, that they are not speaking for the county. And that's an issue. And I'd like to see us put something.
so I don't know that, I think that we could make the argument that comment sections of websites would fall under, because it does define social media to include all means of communicating or posting information or content of any sort on the internet, including, and then it goes into the specific types of social media that we're more familiar with. But we could, this is all, in order for us to discipline anybody, we have to be able to show that our policies apply. And I think that the obligation would be on us, the burden would be on us to fit something like that under the definition of social media. And I think that that is a doable thing.
I'm not talking about social media. I'm talking about actually in the body of an article, for instance.
But I'm saying that we could argue that that comment fits our definition of social media in this policy.
It's kind of a stretch to call a publication social media, even though the definition of media is certainly changing every day. Because it's not social media per se.
I mean, I'm sort of just shooting from the hip here.
think-
You could take the word social out of it and say electronic media. But you are going down a wormhole that I'm terrified of.
Not necessarily electronic, it's also in print. So I don't want us to be hamstrung by like a word
Oh,
electronic.
so are you thinking like somebody submits a letter to the editor?
No, well, in any capacity, if something is published, it's published, whether it's a comment letter to the editor, whether it's in the body of a reporting that's done. That's what I'm referring to.
So I actually think the best way to deal with sort of rogue employees like that, who are out there putting opinions into the world outside of their authority, that should probably be in a different policy and maybe like under a general ethical policy for county employees. I think for the handbook, if we could develop a policy like that, we could then incorporate that into the handbook. But what you're talking about is it needs to be, because there's the line between First Amendment rights and
Yeah.
it's not something that we should probably do up here right now. And it should probably be its own policy because we'll have to go deep into the weeds on it.
But it should be in the handbook so that everybody who works here can say, I saw it, I read it, I know I'm not supposed to do that.
I mean, yes, once we have that developed, but it's not, we have to figure out where you want that line to be. So that is going to be something that the board needs to decide. What would we consider outside the scope of like if they're just wandering around downtown McMinnville spouting stuff out. Like we have to have a line there in order to implement discipline. So it's not as easy as saying you can never do this. It's we have to go find the line and say you can go do this up to this line and then past that you're subject to discipline. And that's something that is best done via a policy, not the handbook.
Also, if
Patricia.
the-
Yeah, so if I could just weigh in a little bit. So I definitely see your concern, Commissioner Starrett. And one of the things that we've also done to include in the handbook is have some provisions around maligning or, we make mention to another policy, which is the bullying policy, which also prohibits employees from maligning, slanderous, making any kinds of comments. The reason, at least from an HR perspective, that social media has become such a targeted point is that when you look at a profile, they usually have the information readily identifiable as that person is a Yamhill County employee. It has their picture. It's easy to see who they follow, their friends. When you see that in a print form, like let's say a comment on a newspaper article or, you know, something where it's just having their names put on there, it's a little bit more difficult to make sure that that is the person who actually worked for the county, unless they explicitly say, I am a county employee and this is what Yamhill County does, and I represent, you know, the beliefs and those actions, which is not usual. More often than not, it's just a name, and, you know, it's hard to see when the, you know, the date stamp, were they expressing that opinion during county time? So social media is a little bit different in that regard, in that, you know, it's usually tied to a profile with date stamps, time. We can see whether or not it was done on county time or not. So at least from an HR perspective, that we do have a different policy that does address those comments in what I believe would be those situations if it were in like print.
That's just bullying though. That's not like
It's
if you're,
bullying, yeah, it does cover slander and
yeah.
maligning.
But I do think that there's value in sort of putting an ethical line around if you are going to be representing yourself as a county employee, what you're allowed under policy to say on our behalf. I just think that that should be done in a policy and we can reference it in the handbook, which like we do with multiple other policies. We say, for more information on this, please see the actual policy. It's just we don't have that policy for that specific thing that would have to get developed.
Yeah, I would be interested in seeing that really defined so that there's no, you know, there's no equivocation of, well, gee, I didn't know, or I was identified as that particular, it was out of my, anyway, I think we really need to make sure that that's in writing somewhere.
How do you hold that employee accountable if, say, they did say that to the reporter, that I'm not representing the county, but they don't add that piece in the particular article? I think that can happen pretty easily.
Well,
And it just gets written as the reporter wants to in their version, which I think we see happen every day in thousands of articles a day.
yeah, I just want to make sure we have memorialized the fact that we don't want any of that, we don't want any of that going on to the degree that
Well,
it, obviously, if
I
somebody
agree,
wants
but
to,
how do you?
if somebody wants to misquote you, we all know that it happens. And if somebody wants to leave out, you know, pertinent details, we know that can happen. That's beyond the scope of our ability. But I do think we have to put it somewhere.
How do you
Well, there's
discipline at that rate?
Well, there's an investigation process to all of them already. So I guess if it became that egregious, the investigation process would uncover that and then find no fault, I would assume. So
Yeah, I mean, that's when due process kicks in. They have the ability to defend themselves and
I think you're identifying the challenges with expanding what's here to cover the concerns that you have. Again, remember, this is limited to prohibited postings. So the way it's here right now is if someone is preparing to post on their own social media page, this is the expectation we would have of them, that they be that clear. I agree. I think if we're interested in, or the board's interested in doing something else to extend that concept about making it clear that you're not representing the county and that you are a Yamhill County employee to other situations, that's a broader conversation that we do have to be careful in, because we got to make sure we don't go too far one direction or the other.
Right. I still think we need to address that.
Yeah.
And maybe it doesn't fit here, but I
Correct.
do think we need to have that somewhere.
Are you okay the way it's written, or do you want to
No,
delay
This
this?
is fine. No, I
okay.
don't want to delay it, but I don't want to put the final stamp as in the employee handbook is now complete, because we haven't addressed that other issue, because under policy.
So
Keep in
let's,
mind too, if the employee handbook is adopted today, it's a living document, so it can come back, it can be
Sure,
amended, it
but
can be
there's
added to.
processes here that, signature pages that, what's going to be my next question is, as soon as this is approved, it's going to go out to
I think that
700
process would start,
employees.
yeah.
And
Yeah,
everybody's going to sign it and be like, yep, I read it.
Yes.
So we want to make sure everything's dialed. So do you want to have a conversation with Jody offline and then bring this back before us?
Probably not Jody.
Yeah.
I am not going to be able to do this before I go. I'm sorry. That is a big policy lift. So that will be a longer conversation that Christian will have to carry.
Okay. Happy to do that.
Yeah. And it may be a conversation that, requires some more feedback and input from the board.
Okay.
So it may be something for a work session.
If I may, I do think that what you're talking about is a great addition. I don't know that I would recommend holding up the employee handbook, which we have been working on for almost 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can we
Over it.
pull the one? Do you know what number it is?
Three.
Is it that you don't want the social media policy,
No.
or that you want to supplement the social media policy?
No, okay. First of
Okay.
all, I want to
Okay.
say that I understand we've been working on this for a long time, but to say, well, we've been working on it for a long time and there's another concern that maybe needs to be addressed. What I'm saying is to turn this, to send this out and then say, oh, but wait, there's more. I don't think that's a good use of anybody's time. So I'm not trying to hold up the works. What I'm trying to do is say, if we're going to do this, let's get this piece done and include that, and then we can send it out.
Okay. So we're going to delay it then if we do it by a week, we're just
Yeah,
talking
it's-
one paragraph here.
No, it'll take longer than that.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh,
It-
we're
it's-
talking about a policy.
Yeah, you're talking about a policy, and you're talking about a significant expansion of the county's interest in regulating or telling employees what they can and cannot say and how they can or can't say it. That's a much larger conversation. It's more than just a paragraph. Because again, remember, this is limited to just what we expect employees to do or not do if they're about to post something on their own webpage and the content of that is Yamhill County.
Mhm.
What we've been talking about is something significantly
Right.
beyond that. So I think it is more than a paragraph, and it will take some time.
Somebody want to judge the wins and give me a rough estimate on how long it would take?
Weeks, months, it could take a while. Again, which is why I would agree with Jody. It's a good conversation to have. We don't have the policy today, right? So if we adopt the balance of the employee handbook, at least we can start that process.
Yeah,
And
but I
appreciate the
agree,
fact that
yeah.
if we have something new, then there would be a supplement. that
We've
folks would
been
need to sign, but
long enough
that's-
already, and
that's
I
going to
don't want to
be-
have everybody
that's gonna
sign
be
it and then
reality.
a month or 2 months later, or whatever,
But
however
that
long
may
it takes.
happen anyway, because again, it's a living document. Anytime there are updates or changes to policies,
Okay.
there will be additional signature requirements that will go out to employees. And so there will be occasional updates. I don't know how frequently it's going to be. It'll depend on.
It's written in the board order. So Ken has to come back and review this once a year. And if amendments are necessary, Ken needs to push those forward in front of the board. So at least annually, this thing will probably be in front of you.
And when was the last time we did this?
2007.
Okay,
Yeah, it's been a long
so
time.
what's
And
another?
that it's so drastically out of date.
But exactly. And so here we are, we got the bum's rush to go ahead and get this approved when there's a significant concern, at least on one commissioner's part. I'm just saying, if we said, we haven't done it since 2007, so we need to get it done. I would not be voting to approve this in the form that it's in. So
And that's
whatever you
fine.
guys want to
Yep.
do.
Yeah,
Okay,
if you're not ready, you're not ready. That's absolutely okay.
Okay, so I made a motion. We had further discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Can you restate the motion, please?
I moved approval of item, geez, mini Christmas, I-4,
Setting an effective date.
and set effective date for April 18th. Then we had further discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Hearing one in favor. All those opposed signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion fails. No, Commissioner Sterrett, Commissioner Johnston voted it down, and Commissioner King voted for approval. Okay. Moving on. Can we circle back to item I-3?
Yes, so the eating piece did not come from statute. I think we can take it out if you want. We can, the language from statute is lying, sleeping. I just had that. Lying, sleeping. Lying, sleeping, or keeping warm and dry. Sitting, lying, sleeping, or keeping warm or dry. So we can just mimic that language because that is, there's a lot of case law around this stuff and I don't want to go south or
Being too
northeast
specific.
or west of where the case law lands because I don't want us to get caught up in any of these
Okay.
lawsuits. So I can change that and bring it back next week, or you can do a motion to amend that definition.
I'm not 100% sure what that definition would look like. If you would
I can
give me that
walk you
language.
through it. Yes.
Hesitant to make you say something next week.
Oh,
Since you're gone.
I will come in with wearing my beach outfit and sunscreen on my face. Okay, so under section 3.01, definition of camping. That's where, okay. It says means to set up or to remain in at or an established campsite for the purpose of. What we would do there is change establishing or maintaining a temporary place to. Pull up the statute. I would recommend not putting sitting. Because that is going to be too hard to enforce. So lying, sleeping, or keeping warm and dry outdoors. Oof. Lying or sleeping, how about that?
72 hours, is that what it?
Yeah, so this isn't an enforcement code. This is how county employees can remove homeless camps from public property. It's not, county employees can't use this policy to go enforce some sort of anti-camping ordinance, which the county doesn't have. It's just when we have a piece of property where a camp has been established, this is the process that county employees have to follow in order to move them off it. Yeah, so all that being said, I would say that the motion would be just to remove eat.
So moved.
Okay, motion's been made. Any further discussion?
None.
None. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Do we need to add effective date?
This
If
one
it's
isn't,
No.
yeah, I don't think this one has to go to the unions.
No.
Yeah.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye. Sorry.
That's all right. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. All right, so we circled back to I-3, I-4's done.
Because we kind of jumped before, so on I-4 with the handbook.
Yeah.
So I know it didn't move forward, but I just wanted to check, you're looking for us to make some additional
I would,
edits or additions to the handbook related to media interaction. And then if we're able to incorporate that in, we can come back with a revised
Correct.
version of the handbook.
correct.
I just want to make sure that there's some
No.
clarity.
Yep.
that-
My biggest reason was I don't want to go out twice for signatures. I want to try to get this done with our best effort once, send it out for signatures. If it's only hopefully a few months, let's do that.
It won't be that long. I mean, we can make this a priority.
I'm not making a
and-
promise anything, but Commissioner Sterrett will work with you and see
Yeah.
what
I think
language looks
that's- I
like and
think
then
it's
bring
good
it
to
back
get- to
before.
Get
and-
get a handle on exactly what it is we want to cover, and then we can
Yep.
frame some language.
Cool.
And we can also talk to other jurisdictions that maybe they've done
Yeah.
similar
Yeah.
things.
Fantastic. Good. Okay, moving on. I-5, consideration of approval to provide intent to award for the Yamhill County Public Works 2025 chip seal project to Sierra Santa Fe Corporation in the amount of $1,484,740. I would move approval. Any further discussion?
None.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Item I6, consideration of approval of the 2025-27 Oregon Department of Education Youth Development Oregon Juvenile Crime Prevention Plan.
Move approval.
There's been a motion. Any further discussion?
None.
None?
None.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to item I7, consideration of approval to rescind board order 2582 and approve amendment number 1 to grant agreement number 10757-400 between Yamhill County and Chemeketa Community College for the Early Childhood Educator Educational Development Program to modify funding distribution terms effective through December 31st, 2026.
I'd move approval.
Motion's been made. Any further discussion?
None.
Ken?
I was just gonna highlight, this was just a housekeeping,
Correct.
correction,
Okay.
for the agreement no change.
Okay, perfect. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. And no public hearings. We are on to item K, announcements. Commissioner King.
Fine. Had lunch last week with the field rep for Andrew Salinas's office. Some coffee with the Mac Fire District guys. Learned quite a bit there. Training on aid and assist. It was nice to be a little more caught up on that topic from Ms. Manfred. DMO partnership meeting with Amity Mayor, Council President and City Manager, Carlton City Council and Amity City Council. And that about wraps up the week. I did get a little bit of a concerning email that I'm happy to forward off to you guys of some cuts for Head Start that are coming. The admin and basically all the offices for Head Start in Oregon will be cut. So I don't know what those services will look like moving forward, but just I would say that, and coupled with Commissioner Sterrett's news last week of HUD moving to San Francisco, those, just the eyes on some of those most vulnerable communities is concerning to me. So happy to forward those emails to you guys if you want, but yeah.
Chair, I'd like to comment on that.
Sure.
A couple of things we need to remember while everyone's talking about the narrative out there is that the sky is falling. And when we're talking about that closure of a regional office that has to do with Oregon and a number of other states, we're talking about administration. We're not talking about cuts to children in schools or funding to children in schools. So I think when we're looking at efficiency for streamlining admin, I think we have to be very clear that we're not letting people think that it's going to impact children who are recipients of Head Start.
Yeah.
Also, to compare that to the HUD closure of the office in Portland, the building is going to be sold. There are a number of admin options. So I think we have to be really clear. Folks are not losing housing
And
or.
I didn't say that, but I think what my concern is wrapped around that these services are being made in urban places, even out of state, and they have no idea what Yamhill County even looks like or even heard of it. So and the people that are lives are depend on these services are being affected. That's what I'm saying. So
The lives are not being
They're-
impacted. The
they're-
services, the admin
Well,
and government,
they-
perhaps bloated government is being impacted. But I think we have to be really clear that we don't continue to get that narrative out there.
I think you're kind of pushing, saying something that I'm not, but I just said that these offices are being closed and there's a
And lives are
concern.
being impacted.
I think they will be, but
Yeah.
Okay, well,
we'll see down the road.
I want to make sure that we're putting some balance to that narrative.
What else you got?
CPRD is going to have to close the Bonnie Benedict, or they're making a decision to close the Bonnie Benedict preschool. And it has been a revenue source, but they're not getting the enrollment. They don't have a lot of kids there. And they're looking at the facility. Actually, we did look at that to give some ARPA funding for the childcare program, but it was in such disrepair that parents are opting for another option in the community where they get free lunch, free breakfast, and it's a better maintained facility. So they're looking at that. And there's another private preschool at the Chehalem Cultural Center. There are 12 registered preschools in Newburgh. The other question was whether or not with the Ewing Young Park, they're going to be reaching out in terms of outreach to neighbors to try to get a little bit more of that information out there. They had an executive session discussing the Crabtree Park recommendation, but that's more to be revealed on that. There were 2 gentlemen who graduated from Adult Recovery Court on Monday, talked about the Aid and Assist program through that training and wanted to see what that looked like in our community. And I have some details on that if anybody is interested in that. Family Wellbeing Council yesterday, we talked about projects that are going to be, for instance, a day camp for foster kids. And we're going to be, I also want to thank our economic development manager for sending out a list of grants, was able to send that to a number of people, including the Reach Northwest, which takes care of foster family, resource family support, and they're going to be advocating for 2 of those grants. So again, wanted to point out, we did get an email from Superintendent Vickery calling out the good work of the SIT teams, the CCO in Sheraton for the shooting victim. That's it.
Cool. Thank you.
I'll stop there.
Yep, thank you. Okay, last Thursday, Lafayette hosted a joint meeting between McMinnville Chamber and Newburgh Chamber. I thought it went well, very well attended. Saw Commissioner King there.
And you saw me too.
And I saw Commissioner Sterrett, and one of the pictures taken, I was like pointing out my badge because Commissioner Sterrett didn't have her badge on, which is pretty rare.
I never.
And I
wear mine.
want a badge that's like big and bright
I
like
will
yours
get
with
you
a
one.
bigger name.
I will get you one.
Anyway, I thought it went well, very well attended. Great conversation. Dave Rucklos couldn't make it, but Larry Strobel, I thought, continued the conversation pretty well. So that went good. Friday, I know last week was all spring break. Man, it was super busy. And I was fortunate enough to have my youngest, Quinn, come along and intern with me. And I think what started that was the day before that she was a volunteer page at the state capitol, and she loved that a lot. And I'm like, wait a second, you're one of them. I have a government job. You should like come intern me. So she went around with me for the day, and we hit 2 parks with Andrew Salinas' rep, Brandon, and discussed funding options for a couple of them. Again, kind of basically the same tours I had with Gustavo the week before for see if there's any potential funding opportunities for Rainbow Lake, because it's due for dredging. And then we went on from that meeting to meet with Dwayne Pace, the new CEO at McMinnville, Willamette Valley Medical Center, the McMinnville Hospital. And Quinn's there with me in the meeting, and I swear they ended up talking more than I did. They were just going back and forth talking about where Quinn's at with college, and hey, don't get locked into a certain thing. So Dwayne would tell a story about how he was going through college, and the the professor was telling them that 70% of you in this room are going to change your profession by the time you're done. And anyway, gave a lot of life stories to Quinn. So that was fantastic. Tuesday, that was last Friday. This Tuesday, attended a community meeting with the McMinnville Community Task Force, and it was a group that they brought together to discuss downtown safety. It was very collaborative. It was nice to see the community and law enforcement come together and discuss ideas and solutions for what a safer downtown looks like. Carlton and Dundee, did you have any updates for city councils? That was also on Tuesday. Okay.
They're just after, oh, sorry, just after grant funding and updates mostly on those. Amity appointed a new counselor.
Oh.
They have a full budget committee, which I think is the first time in about 7 years, from what they said. And yeah, I think that
Oh.
was the updates there.
Cool. Attended Third Street meeting, the third meeting that I've had with DEQ, and it's a community air action planning group. Pretty interesting. I'd like to see a few more people there. So if anybody's interested in that, reach out to me, and as soon as they set the fourth meeting date, I'll make sure I get the contact info to you so you can attend. Wednesday, we had our COG meeting early in the morning at 7 a.m. It was super quick, just kind of a rundown on what legislature bills are coming down the pipe that are getting closer that we need to focus on. I'd say the biggest one that concerns the COG right now would be House Bill 3104. In general, I think we agree with it. I think it's going to be good for the smaller communities throughout the state of Oregon, but ultimately it's the extra admin costs and layers that they're adding to it. COG already does a lot of, I guess, the admin authorities that are being granted from the state of Oregon, but they're stepping up a brand new community program to administer the funds to the COG. I'm like, this is an unnecessary layer to this, and COG agrees. So they're going to go advocate to remove that portion of it, unless you're in an area that doesn't have some form of a COG or a public outreach group. That was Wednesday. Tonight is Chat with the Chair, 6 p.m., Hood Room at the Yamhill County Campus Building. Come on down. I'll be there from 6 to 7. And then right after that, I have Planning Commission meeting tonight, 7 p.m., room 32, where we're at right now. Oh, when did that get canceled? Never mind. There's no Planning Commission meeting tonight in room 32.
Just speaking of tonight, 11 applications for Fair Ambassador. We've got
Oh,
every one of them is just a absolutely outstanding candidate. So that's going to be tonight. I will be looking at those and listening to those. Also want to say thank you. Our economic development manager puts on the website a list of all the grants that people that might be of interest. So go on there and look at them. There were just a few that really impacted our nonprofits, which would be really good. And also, if anybody's interested, June 30th, there's going to be a day camp for foster kids and a foster parent appreciation day. So please reach out to me and I'll get you hooked up, and it's definitely well worth it.
fantastic. And that'll be it for our formal session today at 12:17. Thanks for hanging in there, Paulette.